appreciate everybody gathering here this evening. Call to order for the James City County Wetlands Board. It is the responsibility of this board to carry out locally the Commonwealth policy to preserve the wetlands and to accommodate economic activities so as to prevent their despoliation. Roll call, Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Waltrip?
Here.
Mr. O'Brien?
Here.
Mr. May?
Here.
Mr. Knight?
Here.
Mr. Roadley?
Here. We're going to deviate a little bit from the agenda and move to board considerations for the election of officers. Do I have a nomination for chair? Currently, Haley is out of town. He is acting chair. Do I have a nomination for chair?
I'll nominate Hallie.
We have a nomination for Hallie. Do I have a second?
I would second that.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Motion carried. Election for vice chair. Do I have a nomination for vice chair? Somebody's got to pick it. Do I have a nomination for vice chair?
I nominate Larry.
You inclined to agree, Larry?
Not really.
Do I have another nomination for vice chair?
I nominate the gentleman to my left.
Mr. May, you accept the
Yes.
nomination?
I would accept that.
Can I have a vote, please? All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carried. And for secretary, Mr. Wilson, will you be kind enough to join us for secretary again?
I would prefer Mr. Long,
Mr. Long?
if he is amenable to that.
Very good. Mr. Long? Yes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. There are no matters of special privilege, but I would like to now convey the remainder of the minutes to the new chairman. Oh, Haley's not here. Vice chair. Is that you, Mr. May?
Yes, sir.
You can finish with of minutes.
All right, so the minutes from the November 9th, 2022 regular board meeting, are there any changes requested to those minutes?
Nope.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes
moved.
from the November meeting? I did have a motion to approve
So
those.
moved.
We now take a vote. If you approve those, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Now we have the meetings to approve from the November 9th, 22 meeting. This is the second set from November 9th. Do we have a motion to approve those, that second set of meeting minutes?
Yeah, a motion to approve.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. If we have no matters of special privilege, I would say we'd adjourn.
Very good. I will call to order the Chesapeake Bay Board meeting for Wednesday, December 14th, 2022. Call to order. The responsibility of this board is to carry out locally the Commonwealth policy to protect against and minimize pollution and deposition of sediment in wetlands, streams, and lakes in James City County, which are tributaries to the Chesapeake Bay. Roll call, Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Here.
Mr. May?
Here.
Mr. Knight,
Here.
Mr. Odling.
Here. Before we begin with the agenda and the reading of the minutes, I'd like to take a moment. We have two resolutions of appreciation for two past board members who served this board and the county and the citizens of James City County, Mr. Bob Lukens and Mr. David Gussman. Mr. Lukens couldn't be with us here tonight, but Mr. Gussman is here, and I would like to read the resolution of appreciation into the record. Whereas Mr. Gussman served the citizens of James City County and the Wetlands Board continuously from January 1989 to July 2022. And whereas Mr. Gussman served the citizens of James City County on the Chesapeake Bay Board continuously from April 2004 to July 2022. And whereas incalculable hours of voluntary service were given by Mr. Gussman and his high qualifications to handle many challenges were invaluable to the successful betterment of the county's natural resources. And whereas the Wetlands Board and Chesapeake Bay Board will feel a great loss of one whose ability and personal qualities have meant so much to the protection of the county's natural resources, now therefore be it resolved that the Wetlands Board and the Chesapeake Bay Board of James City County, Virginia extends congratulations to Mr. Gussman on his leadership that has given the county the stature it now enjoys, and its sincere appreciation for services as a Wetlands Board member and as a Chesapeake Bay Board member, and hopes that the coming years bring good health, happiness, and a full share of those things that make this world a better place in which to live. Be it further resolved that this resolution be entered into the minutes of the Wetlands Board and a copy be presented to Mr. David Gussman.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to serve on the board. I always appreciate the high standards of the board and the seriousness everybody took their job. Also want to thank the staff for their professionalism. And staff is always great, very supporting. 1989 I started. My God, some of the staff wasn't born yet. But it's been a pleasure working with you all, and keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Back to our agenda, the minutes, you all have the minutes from October 12th meeting. Are there any changes? Motion to approve?
Motion.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Minutes are approved from the October 12th meeting. We also have the minutes from the October 9th meeting, November 9th meeting. Are there any changes requested? No changes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the November 9th meeting as presented?
Motion.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carried. We'll now start on public hearings, and we have a number of them tonight. The outline of tonight's public hearings will be a staff presentation, followed by any questions or clarifications from the board. Then the public hearing will be opened. At that time, anybody wishing to speak may do so once called upon by the chair. All public speakers must state their name and address for the record. If anyone wishing to speak, after everyone wishing to speak have done so, the public hearing will be closed and the discussion among the board will start. The first case tonight is CBPA 22-0137 at 133 Racefield Drive for construction of a porch. Ms. Benedict.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Robin Benedict, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 22-0137. Ms. Hannah Fletcher and Ms. Erin Martin of Crossroad Custom Builders have applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. Jerry and Ms. Pamela Woodson for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the replacement of a deck with a screened-in porch located at 133 Racefield Drive, You can see the parcel above highlighted in blue. This is within the Racefield subdivision in the Diaskin Creek watershed. This parcel was platted in 1985 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. Here is aerial photography of the site as a whole, and here it is again, just slightly zoomed in on the project location. You can see the house right there. Here's topography at the site and the resource protection area going not quite halfway through the existing home. The total lot size of this property is 2.91 acres, of which 74% is located within the RPA. The applicants are proposing to remove the existing deck on the side of the home and replace it with a screened-in porch. Here on the site plan, you can see the 150-foot resource protection area. The area in yellow is the existing impervious cover, or the existing deck on the property, and the area in orange around it is the proposed screened-in porch. The existing deck is 6 feet by 8 feet, and the proposed porch is 12 feet by 18 feet. Total existing impervious equals 72 square feet, and the proposed total impervious is 264 square feet. Therefore, total impacts associated with this proposal equate to 192 square feet of impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 8 shrubs. Here's site photography of the existing deck and stairs. Here you can see just in the corner is a stake of the proposed screened-in porch. Slightly different view. And here's the flag on the other side for the other portion of the screened-in porch. And then looking back further into the RPA current conditions on the property. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the replacement of a deck with a screened-in porch. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a porch is considered accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicants any special privileges denied to other property owners in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and reasonable conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicants must obtain all of the necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. A mitigation plan equating to 8 shrubs must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division and approved prior to project start. A surety of $500 must be submitted in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee these mitigation plantings. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction has not begun by December 14th, 2023, with written requests for an extension submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than November 2nd, 2023, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Any questions for Ms. Benedict?
Thank you.
I will open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to speak? Nope. Anybody in the audience care to speak on this matter? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. The matter is before the board. Any questions, comments? Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA 220137-133 Racefield Drive.
We have a motion to adopt the resolution.
Motion to adopt, Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. The next case, CBPA 22-0143 at 9935 Walnut Creek for the construction of a deck. Mr. Long.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, James City County Watershed Planner. To present CBPA-22-0143. Mr. Lloyd Stevens Builder, has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. Paul Puglia for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a deck on property located at 9935 Walnut Creek within the Stonehouse subdivision and the Ware Creek watershed. This parcel can be seen above, outlined here in blue, with the watershed divide here in purple. An aerial photograph of this property is shown above with the outline of the property itself here in blue again. This parcel was platted in 2001 before the changes to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 2004. Total lot size of this property is 0.72 acres, of which 60% is located within the RPA. Existing conditions of this property include a deck at the rear of the existing home and contours that slope down towards a stream channel at the bottom of a ravine. As seen above, the contours are fairly drastic as soon as you leave what was the building envelope of the original site. The contours are outlined here in green. And the resource protection area as it affects this lot here in red. Again, 60% of this lot is located within the RPA, and the project location is in approximately this area. The applicant is proposing to transform the existing deck into a screened porch and construct a new deck next to the existing deck. The existing deck shown on this site plan is approximately here, with the transformation and the new deck on this particular photo just left of the existing deck. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 209 square feet in the landward 50-foot RPA. This is further shown on the site plan above with the 100-foot resource protection area outlined here in red, the 50-foot resource protection area outlined here, the proposed deck in yellow, and the existing deck, which is proposed to be converted into a screened porch in orange. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 7 shrubs. Some site photographs. The applicant has been kind enough to outline the proposed deck in this orange flagging here. The contours that I was describing and the ravine begin just here in this wood line. Again, there is a fairly steep drop off down to the resource, which is at the bottom of the ravine. Looking out from the existing deck onto the proposed deck. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a deck. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a deck is considered accessory in nature. Board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer on the applicant any special privileges denied to other property owners similarly situated in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed. nor does it arise from conditions either permitted or non-conforming that are related to adjacent parcels, and that reasonable and appropriate conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception requests and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval of this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval: that all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project are required. A mitigation plan equating to 7 shrubs be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division and approved prior to the project start. A surety of $500 be submitted in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee these mitigation plantings. The placement of 3 inches of gravel over filter fabric under the footprint of the deck. That this exception request will become null and void if construction has not begun by December 14th, 2023. And that written requests for an extension to the exception must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than November 2nd, 2023, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date of this exception request. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Long?
Is the new deck impervious?
Yes, it would be wood decking and therefore considered impervious.
Anything else for Mr. Long? We'll move to the public hearing then.
Thank you.
I will open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to address the board? Nope. Would anybody else in the audience care to address the board on this matter? Yes. I just need to get you on the record. Your name and
Gail Norbury, and I live at 130 Swinley Forest. I'm just noticing you've had 2 exceptions so far, and I'm just wondering what the criteria is for an exception if they're already on protected land.
So the criteria for an exception in terms of the board reviews, there are guidance documents that the board has for encroachment into the Chesapeake Bay preservation areas. And our goal here is to minimize either that encroachment or the negative impacts associated with that encroachment.
I understand all of that, but you seem to be making exceptions. Is there a size of land is too big, or?
Each matter is considered on its own merits.
Okay, so no criteria really. Thank you.
Anybody else care to address the board? That being said, I'll close the public hearing. Any more discussion amongst the board? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. Make a motion to adopt a resolution to grant exception request for Chesapeake Bay case CBPA -0 at 95 on it.
So we have a motion to adopt. Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Move on to the next case, CBPA case 22-0144 at 137 Thomas Dale, the installation of a pool. Ms. Benedict?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Robin Benedict, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 22-0144. Mr. Fuller Reeves with Anthony and Sylvan Pools Corporation has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. Anthony and Ms. Kelly Terracina for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a pool located at 137 Thomas Dale. The parcel is outlined here in blue, and this is within the Kingsmill subdivision and the College Creek watershed. The parcel was platted in 1985 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. Above, you can see aerial photograph of the existing home. Here's topography, fairly flat in the backyard and becoming steeper towards the creek behind the home. Here's the RPA as it affects this lot. The home is entirely outside of the RPA. The total lot size of this property is 0.69 acres, of which 17% is located within the RPA. Existing conditions of the site include a single-family dwelling, existing detached garage, and an existing patio situated adjacent to the proposed pool and outside of the RPA. The applicants are proposing to construct a pool of which 880 square feet impact the landward 50-foot RPA. Here on the site plan, you can see the existing home. In orange is the existing patio, and also the existing garage that was mentioned is over here. This red line is the 100-foot RPA buffer. The darker blue is the area of the proposed pool and a little bit of the proposed pool deck that is within the RPA. And again, the existing patio there shown in orange. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals the planting of 2.5 planting units, which is 2 canopy trees, 4 understory trees, and 9 shrubs. Some of that mitigation has been shown here behind the proposed pool. I'd also like to clarify that on this site plan, the area of yellow surrounding the pool and coming up the side of the property is shown for the construction entrance and area that may be needed for construction vehicles for the pool. Here's site photography. This line of flags on the right are in line with the RPA buffer, and then show the rest of the pool that's within the RPA. Another viewpoint standing at the far back of the property, looking up at the area of the pool. You can also see that existing patio a little bit here in the background. From the other side, again, the RPA line now shown on the left. And just another view, again, gives you a good idea of the existing patio out on the property and the detached garage. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a pool. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a pool is considered accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicants any special privileges denied to other property owners in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and reasonable conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be moderate for their proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicants must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The submittal of a mitigation plan equating to 2.5 planting units be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division prior to project start. A surety of $1,000 be submitted in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee these mitigation plantings. The exception request approval shall become null and void if construction has not begun by December 14th, 2023, with written requests for an extension submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than November 2nd, 2023, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Any questions for staff?
Yellow that you were referencing for the road to build the project, is that goes back to grass or in that area? Pavement or
No, it just goes back to grass.
grass, the original,
Yes, sir.
around the pool?
Yep.
The picture showed the shrubbery in the green. Is that equal to 2.5 planting units or more?
I
Or
don't
is that
have,
just a rendition?
I believe that's just a rendition, not a final mitigation plan, so I don't have that number with me right now to see if it's equal.
One other question, is this saltwater pool as far as emptying this College Creek, halfway creek? How's that being?
I'm not sure what type of pool this is, but if the applicant is here, I would defer that question to them.
Any other questions for staff? If not, I will open the public hearing. Would the applicant or their agent care to address the board? Evening.
Board members, Fuller Reeves, 3212 Quail Hill Drive, representing the Terracinas and Anthony and Sylvan Pools. To answer your question, Mr. Waldrop, it is a salt water pool. And O'Brien, Mr. O'Brien, the plantings in the rendering are over the required amounts for the mitigation plantings.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would anybody else care to address this matter before the board? Hearing none, the public hearing is closed. Any discussion from the board? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA 22-0144 at 137 Thomas Dale.
So we have the motion to adopt. Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes?
Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next case, CBPA 22-0145 at 106 Rye, construction of a single-family dwelling. Mr. Long?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, James City County Watershed Planner, here to present CBPA-22-0145. Mr. Chase Grogg of Landtech Resources, Inc. has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Ms. Susan Crancer for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a single-family dwelling and 2 retaining walls on property located at 106 Rye within the Fords Colony subdivision in the Powhatan Creek watershed. This parcel can be seen here above in blue, again within the Fords Colony watershed, subdivision, and the Powhatan Creek watershed, which is outlined here in purple. The total lot size of this property is 0.52 acres, of which 88% is located in the RPA. An aerial photograph of this property is provided above. It is a flag lot and is outlined here in blue. The topography of this lot is a sloping nature at the beginning of the actual flag and comes down into wetlands with resource protection area, of which encompasses, again, 88% of this lot. 0.15 acres of this lot are considered wetlands, which are outlined here in black. These wetlands are connected to the pond that exists behind this lot via a pipe that is in this region here. There is a JCSA easement outlined here in yellow. And the drainage path that the water takes after leaving this property is as follows. It goes into a series of 3 BMPs before discharging to Powhatan Creek. And it is notable the surrounding house sizes of this area. The average square footage of the lot or of the properties are approximately 3,330 square feet. The applicant is proposing to construct a single-family dwelling and 2 retaining walls, which equate to approximately 1,368 square feet of impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA and 2,156 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA, for a total of 3,524 square feet of impacts to the RPA as a whole. Additionally, there are 1,000 square feet of impacts to the wetlands associated with fill. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 9 planting units, which equals 9 canopy trees, 18 understory trees, and 27 shrubs. At this time, no infiltration BMP has been proposed for this dwelling. Above on the site plan, you can see the resource protection area here in red. The 50-foot resource protection area also here in red. The edge of the wetlands that I was describing earlier here in green. The area of the home that exists within the seaward 50-foot RPA here in yellow. And the area of the home and driveway within the, landward 50-foot RPA here in orange. The 2 retaining walls that are proposed for the construction of the driveway and house are here in red, and wetland impacts for fill here in green. The total square footage of the house itself is 2,220 square feet at the first floor elevation. Keeping this in mind in comparison to the houses around it. This is the mitigation plan that has been shown or provided at this time. The mitigation plan that has been provided does meet the requirements from the county staff. 9 canopy trees, 18 understory trees, and 27 shrubs have been proposed as mitigation and can be shown on the mitigation plan here above. Some site photographs. This is standing at the street looking in towards the flag portion of this lot. Looking in towards the actual portion of building, we are standing about right where one of the retaining walls, the most westerly retaining wall likely would be, looking down, and the wetlands is difficult to tell in this photograph. However, they extend and start right about here. Here is one of the house stakes for the most for the front of the house. And looking backwards towards the end of the house, another stake here with wetland flags in this region. Again, another stake here showing the front right corner of the house with wetland flags around this tree. And standing at the edge of the actual wetlands, you can see the pink and black ribboning on this tree. And behind this lot as a whole, you can see the BMP that this lot backs up to. And this is just a photo looking back up towards the driveway. Staff has evaluated the application and exception requests for the construction of a single-family dwelling. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of the single-family dwelling extends into the seaward 50-foot RPA and the two retaining walls are considered accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicant any special privileges denied by Chapter 23 to other property owners similarly situated in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request will be in harmony, the exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, nor does it arise from conditions or circumstances either permitted or non-conforming that are related to adjacent parcels, and that reasonable and appropriate conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be major for the proposed development. Should the board wish to approve this request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval: that all other necessary local, state, and federal permits are required as necessary. The submittal of a mitigation plan equating to 9 planting units be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division. This condition has been met, given the mitigation plan previously in the presentation. That a surety of $4,500 be submitted in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee these mitigation plantings. That an affidavit must be recorded in the Williamsburg James City County Courthouse prior to the issuance of a building permit. That this exception request approval will become null and void if construction is not begun by December 14th, 2023, and that written requests for an extension to an exception must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than November 2nd, 2023, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date of this permit. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Any questions for staff?
Yeah, I have one question. If you go back to one of the beginning charts where it shows the property in relation to houses to either side, it's like the first or second one. One more. Is that the first one? Oh, no.
A little bit further back?
Yeah, that one right there. Well, it's probably not a good one. Yeah, so I'm just curious, the 50-foot RPA, I understand where that's at on the project location, but where does that 50-foot RPA go in relation to the houses to either side of it?
Sure. Following my cursor here, the 50-foot would approximately come through this region and then back up. And then on the northern side, just following in between these two lines here, just splitting this difference.
Okay, so the house on the left is not in the 50-foot?
More than likely not. If any of it is, it's likely the yard space.
Okay, but the one on the right?
This one would likely
cuts
be
through
within the 50-foot RPA.
One question, Trevor. Could you go back to the slide that shows the limits of clearing?
Yes, sir.
I just want to see that. Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
So these limits of clearing are this this bubbled line here that make this kind of square shape here.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? If not, I will open the public hearing. Would the applicant or his agent care to address the board?
Good evening, members of the board. Chase Grogg with Land Tech Resources, 205 Bullfonts Boulevard, Suite E, Williamsburg, Virginia. Here to discuss 106 Rye. Thank you for your time this evening. Just to go down to a couple of the things that Trevor summed up. So yes, this house is sized to where it's less than the average house. As you can see from that map, there's significant number of decently sized houses in the area that also have, the same impacts within to the buffer area. Tried to work with our client to reduce the size as much as possible to limit our impacts. It's a tough lot due to the topography on it. It basically, I know a couple of you went to the site, but it basically just slopes left to right all the way down to the wetlands. So there's not really a good spot to, create some flat spots. So that's the retaining wall on the left there along the property line is to basically hold the soil back from lot 83. Our flat driveway comes across, and then the retaining wall on the right is to then support our driveway. We kept the grading as tight as we could. Basically, that's a 3-to-1 slope from the retaining wall and the house. The only slight difference there is to try and prevent issues down the road. We left about a 5-foot flat area around the house so that when the site, if approved, was cleared, they could create a buildable, flat pad to work off of and then grade a slope 3-to-1 down to the wetlands. It's the same reason why when you look at the proposed mitigation plan, I know we do our best to avoid placing sod and grass all the way up to the wetlands, but in realizing that that's a 3-to-1 slope, trying to get anything to grow there and vegetate and not just continually have runoff into the wetlands, we thought it'd be best to get grass, which should stabilize that slope and prevent those wetlands in the long run. And Mr. May, just to discuss, I know you asked about the clearing, and so that's, the clearing is basically as tight as we could get it to get our grading to work. There's no, we just tried to clear as little behind the house to, not have any trees, again, kind of talking long-term during construction, roots getting messed with, as well as then the clearing on the right, trying to prevent as much actual wetland disturbance as possible, which is why they, basically go right up to our clearing. So, and then the only other thing I'd like to discuss is BMPs. This site didn't seem conducive to the main reason being the size you would need to be able to treat something, since it is on, the side of a hill, being able to create a flat spot that water would actually pond, then overflow was going to be difficult, as well as on our front portion there off the front right corner of the house. Basically, all of Lot 81's water comes that way. So any BMP that we would even size there, to try and treat our water wouldn't be sized correctly with the amount of water that then is, is coming onto our lot and would most likely not operate correctly, as well as in that particular area, there's not a particular amount of fall to be able to daylight a pipe and not impact even more wetlands. Happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Questions from the
Was there concern for ponding it all towards the back of the lot? I know it's kind of a tough site, but the outfall of the swale towards the left, it has a bit of a way to go towards that 15, if I'm reading that right, 15-inch metal pipe towards that BMP. And so I was curious whether through site visits or anything you had noticed any existing ponding going on where the site kind of gets flat right before the ridge towards the golf course?
Yeah, so the couple times I've been there, it's been pretty much dry, relatively dry in there. It's not like I've had to wade through water.
Right.
And that's basically what, that pipe when it was installed was most likely designed to handle all of the water, that flows that way. Mm-hmm. If I was really betting, I'm going to guess that the golf course probably at some point wanted a crossing there. Mm-hmm. And so that's most likely why that pipe got put in there, because, prior to any development there, this was most likely just a draw that went down there. So in the construction of that BMP and the golf course, they installed that pipe to be able to just let that water have a release point.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
How are you treating outflow from the gutters?
At the moment, it's being treated. It'll go down onto the surface. Downspouts. Yeah, sheet flow onto the ground. Trying to keep it with the site topography. Trying to keep that as spread as sheet flow and spread out as possible to avoid as much channeling as we can. On the project.
Just one of the reasons I asked that is what we see a lot of in homes that are built in James City County is over time you end up with hard rain events, and then the backyard starts washing away, and it's the surface runoff, but you end up with the rills and mm-hmm. so forth. So I can appreciate you're trying to spread it, but also trying to reduce it going down slopes if at all possible.
Yeah, so more than happy to add a condition in there to have the ground spouts or the gutter downspouts be outfalled at the toe slope, with a work with staff to just do a little stone river rock basin there to be able to remove some of that water from those slopes. I have no issue adding that in there.
Any other questions for the applicant's agent?
Bringing some rough ones in.
That's, I was talking to a builder the other day, and that's, there's like 30 lots in Ford's Colony that basically have no issues. There's another 70 or 80 that are all encumbered with flood zone or RPA. So, yes.
Oh, you're doing all you can do.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would anybody else care to address this case?
Good evening, board members. My name's Gail Watkins. I live at 131 Swinley Forest, and my property backs up to the Rye location. My concern is I would be up, I believe on that lot, I would be up, if you look at that map, it would be lot number 74, which is where my home is located. That this piece of property is a gully, basically. It drops down into the center. It's very sloped. There is a lot of water. There is almost like a small river or stream that runs from this property. It goes across to the next property, to the right, and to the other one beyond it on Swinley Forest. This is information that I have from according to the contractor that worked on an adjacent house to ours. My concern with our own property is the amount of trees. There is a green belt between us, and we would hate to have any of the trees removed. Adjacent to that, we have a lot of holly trees, which creates a good amount of privacy for us, as well as the wildlife and the wetlands. This lot is wet almost all year long if you get down into the center of it, so it will be hard. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have
Ms.
questions for
Watkins,
me?
I'm going to ask staff if they have another image so that I can get a frame of reference for where your lot is. Yeah.
Okay, sure. I just saw my house there in a moment.
Okay.
Okay, if you see where Swinley Forest is? Okay,
Yes.
and the house at the very end? I'm the second house on the left as you're going down Swinley Forest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else care to address this matter?
Good evening. Joe Adkins, 106 Rye. So I'm the house right there to the left. So my concerns would be, of course, the access just to get to the property, the orientation of the house as it sits, essentially what I'd be looking in, and also there's already retention walls on the side of my property that would be adjacent to the driveway as it comes in. It sounds like it would be where there would be another retention wall that would either extend with mine as well. So that would be a concern. So a request that if this is approved, I guess my third concern would be obviously the size of the house in comparison to the other houses around it, immediately around it. Lastly, a request that if this is approved, that we be afforded the opportunity to identify the trees on the property lines that we would like to remain. Questions?
Any questions for Mr. Atkins?
So the building wall that's on the driveway, your concern is that there's two of them, or that the water from one would go from one to the other? So my retaining wall, is that how it's identified right there already?
Yeah, that's your block wall that is pointed to there. That's
And you would, and yours would extend off on that?
I can show you on paper here, and for the board, you utilize the mouse, so maybe not. No mouse. But so right at the IRF, right where the property takes an angle is the place where our retaining wall, so that's our tightest point where we're trying to create a flat spot for the driveway. So we are a good bit of distance, probably about 30 feet away from your retaining wall, actually at the property corner, trying to retain that soil. Yes, right there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, the size of this house, or the footprint of this house is less than or equal to the adjacent houses?
Much less than.
Yeah, much less, yeah. Yeah, the square, I mean, the average, as Trevor mentioned, the square footage of this house is less than the adjoining.
I thought you mentioned that it was more than. I must.
34 compared to 20.
I think the issue is property value.
Yes, the issue is property.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins. Would anybody else care to address this case? Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
We're asking about, I'm sorry, to answer your question about the size. My own property is 5,200 square feet. The house behind me, which is adjacent to this, is 4,500. So yes, there's a big difference in the size of the properties, of the houses.
Mine's 49, so as well.
49, yes, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watkins.
Yes, he does have a right to be very concerned, because I would estimate the entrance of that driveway to be no wider than 3 of these cubicles together. It's a very, very narrow entrance off that street.
The driveways for both 105.
Exactly. Very small.
Thank you, Ms. Watkins. Are there any other comments from the public on this matter? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. The matter is before the board.
Mr. Roadley, we did have one more.
Oh, sorry. I missed it.
If you would please open the public.
Public hearing is open.
Kevin Foley, 105 Rye. I actually had a question. The retaining wall on the left, the way the water flows on that property currently, it kind of funnels down. I guess my issue would be the water runoff from that retaining wall. Has that been projected? Or, because it kind of, the 2 yards, it's funneling down into the watershed. You build that wall with the water running that way, I'm worried it's going to come back into the yard. Has that been projected, or?
Yeah, so obviously, when we deal with both James City County, just on a regular plot plan minus Chesapeake Bay, as well as Forts County, cross-lot drainage is a major concern. So on this particular instance, there's a swale along the northern part of the driveway, or the left side, that then brings the water along. Our driveway will be shedding right to left, as well as then the parking pad in front of the garage will be sloped right to left to prevent water. Since the wall on the left is a retaining wall, and will be below that, the wall on the right, we don't want the water to overtop the wall on the right, so that is all sloped to the left to then a swale down our house. And then as soon as you get back to the left side of our house, then the slope of the yard is sloped that way, and will then go into the back and go into the pipe. And so same thing in the front yard, basically. The only water that's gonna go there, and can I take that for a second? Sorry. I appreciate it. Oh, wait, no, it's not gonna work. All right, never mind, Mike, you're in charge. From the end of Lot 81's concrete driveway, basically their driveway's almost failing on the end. Their water is just gonna sheet flow down. The water runs perpendicular to those contour lines. So it's just gonna go straight down into a swale and out. So basically, we're kind of flattening out the bowl and creating a channel on the right side, and then creating a channel on the left side.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to check, because right on the golf course, right on the other side of the pine straw, it puddles pretty bad. We just had that rainstorm probably 3 weeks ago. And I didn't know if the drainage was going to add any more to that, because it does kind of come into the 105 backyard sometimes.
So since this is a bowl, literally all this water, the greenway's higher, the golf course is higher, Lot 83 is higher, Lot 81's higher. All of our water goes to that metal pipe into the back, and then into the BMP, and you can't even see the pipe in the BMP because it's below the water grade, or water level.
Anyone else? Okay, yes, sir.
Hi, James Noren, 132 Swinley Forest, which is across the street from Gail. First, I'd like to confirm what she has said. And I walk around that area, and you would never know there was a lot there. There really is no drive. I mean, the way it looks, there is no driveway there. It's just a little bit of a few trees. But as far as the lot itself, I think in most cases it would be considered unbuildable. but I guess it was purchased for $35,000, basically as on the idea that maybe they could do something with it. That is not any, in addition to the house being a lower footprint and a lower value, the lot itself, the lot I live in 1991 was purchased for $270,000, which I'd say was a little bit of a bubble, but 31 years later, I mean, you're talking about a lot value and house value that doesn't really fit in with the neighborhood. And of course, we're all concerned about drainage in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else care to address the board on this matter? Going once, going twice. All right. Closing the public hearing. Matter is before the board. Is there any discussion from the board members? I will say that for the public, it's a challenge. I understand your concerns for the size of the home and potential impact on home value in the area, given it's a smaller footprint and therefore a smaller value. One of the challenges that the board has is constantly looking to mitigate impacts to the jurisdictional features that we are charged with regulating. And oftentimes that is a request to reduce the size of the house to reduce the impact. But I can appreciate your concern. It didn't fall on deaf ears. I just want you to help you understand part of the process that we go through for avoidance and minimization is to reduce footprints as much as possible and where practical. So just a general comment.
And that's the reason I brought up the question. I was concerned that it was the minimum, were we addressing the minimum impact, which would imply that you want a smaller house, and it seems to address that.
Mr. Chair, I would also say that this certainly is a very challenging lot. It looks like the applicant has done their best to position the house as close to the street as possible and to minimize the clearing limits and such. So I'm not sure what else they could really do on this lot.
It's my understanding that certain HOAs will have covenants talking about sort of a minimum house size or things of that nature. And, when we talk about downsizing a house to sort of minimize impact, sometimes I kind of wish we had some information like that just so to kind of give a scope of what the minimum truly is. Because certainly when, it comes to the adjacent property owners, they might, want smaller, and I certainly understand that, but I'm just kind of trying to get a degree of it, if that makes sense. So just for now, we kind of have the nearby properties for comparison.
So just to make sure I'm clear, you're suggesting knowing the minimum square footage on the first floor might be a useful piece of information in your consideration?
I just don't know if HOAs will have it outlined where if you're going to build upon a lot, you have to have a minimum building footprint per se, if that makes sense, or if there's some sort of running average. I know that might be kind of a bit to ask for, but it just kind of helps, define a few metrics for me at least.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Sorry, I've closed the public hearing. Any other questions or comments from the board?
I think the gentleman mentioned about the trees to minimize in the lot total. That's needs to be addressed to maintain as many trees as you can through there. That have lessen the size of the home and try to meet the requirements. It's a tough one.
Anything else from the board? I know one of the factors that we often consider in Ford's Colony, since our charge is to minimize the deposition of sediment within these resources, is to evaluate or look at or consider, perhaps is a better way to say it, the landscape position of the encroachment relative to the stormwater management, best management practices that are within this community. And as I think Mr. Long stated at the outset, this particular property flows through downstream 3 separate BMP facilities before it discharges. Not trying to influence anybody's vote, just making an observation that is part of our charge.
Which is highly unusual to have that many in series.
We don't find it often. Any other questions or comments from the board? Do I have a motion?
A motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA 22-0145 at 106 Rye.
We have a motion to adopt. Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Motion passes.
The next case is CBPA 22-0135 at 134 Swinley Forest. Construction of a single-family home. Mr. Long.
Afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, James City County Watershed Planner, here to present CBPA-22-0135. Mr. Matthew Roth, Roth Environmental, LLC, has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. Alan Hochberg for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a single-family dwelling located at 134 Swinley Forest within the Fords Colony subdivision and the Powhatan Creek watershed outlined above. The property is here in blue, and the watershed boundary is here in purple. Parcel was platted in 1986 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990, and the parcel can be seen above, again outlined here in blue. Total lot size of this property is 0.40 acres, of which 100% is located within the RPA. Existing conditions of the property include sloping topography from the front of the property to the back, and approximately 0.15 acres of wetlands, which encompass 38% of this lot. Above, you can see the topography on this lot outlined here in green, and the resource protection area in red on this particular lot, with the wetland line outlined here in black. So again, that is 38% of this lot in wetlands and 100% of the lot within the resource protection area. The wetlands extend up the length of the property and are connected to the edge of the stormwater management pond, which is located to the rear of the property. Excuse me as I go back again. You can see how this wetland line connects here slightly off property, but forming a system of connected wetlands, which is why the resource protection area extends off of these features. The applicant is proposing to construct a single-family dwelling on the lot. The design of this two-story dwelling includes a two-car garage, a screened-in porch, and a driveway. These amenities above would be shown here in yellow. Again, this is the house. This is the driveway, and the screen-in porch is here in the back. The 50-foot resource protection area is here in red. The limits of clearing are shown here in this dashed line. For the board's information, there is a maintenance easement back here in blue, and the limits of wetlands are here in green. This area here does show the overlap in between the wetlands, the construction, and the limits of clearing. Due to the constraints of this lot, the proposed house and driveway will impact both the seaward 50-foot RPA and the wetlands on the lot. Total impacts associated with the construction of the proposed single-family dwelling equate to 3,191 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA and 682 square feet of impacts to the wetlands. This case was deferred from a previous meeting. During that time, it was deferred in order to amend the site plan and work with staff to minimize encroachments. During the time from the original deferral and now, the RPA impacts were reduced by 402 square feet, and the wetland impacts were reduced by 608 square feet. A nationwide permit 18 is required from the United States Army Corps of Engineers for the proposed wetland impacts and will be required prior to the issuance of a building permit. Required mitigation for this amount of, in reference to the reduction in the house size that I was mentioning earlier, the proposed residence is outlined here in gray, where the original house and driveway were proposed here in red. So you can see where the applicant did take measures to minimize encroachments and attempt to shift the house out of the wetlands as much as possible. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts to the RPA buffer equals 8 planting units, which equates to 8 canopy trees, 16 understory trees, and 32 shrubs. At this time, no infiltration or other on-lot best management practice has been proposed due to poorly drained soils located on the lot. However, runoff from the development will either drain into a drainage easement and flow directly into the stormwater management pond located to the north of the property, or flow directly into the wetlands on the property that are subsequently attached to the pond. Similar to the previous case, this house is situated in such a way that the drainage from this will drain into a series of 3 to 4 BMPs before discharging into the Powhatan Creek watershed or creek system. Above is a mitigation plan submitted by the applicant showing the proposed plantings. Again, 8 units are required. The applicant has proposed 6, I believe a little more than 6 units here around the house as mitigation, and does plan to pay 4 units into the James City County Mitigation Trust Fund. Therefore, proposed mitigation in conjunction with the payment of the mitigation fund would exceed what is required for this lot. Some photographs from the site. Standing at the edge of the property, the multicolored flags here, it's difficult to tell in this photo, but there is a series of multicolored flags here, show the limits of clearing on the lot. Attached, you can see a wetland flag here in pink and black. That is the northernmost wetland flag as it affects this property. And again, the limits of clearing just behind it. This red flag here indicates a house corner with the limits of clearing just off of it. The furthest right property or house corner here, again in orange, through this thicket of trees here or vegetation, you can see the pond that this backs up to. And the far left house corner here in orange. Looking back towards the wetlands and also back towards the street. And looking towards the drainage easement or the maintenance easement that runs along this side of the house, which captures much of the water that is draining to the east of this property. One last thing, similar to the previous case, the average of the surrounding feet of the house is 3,300 square feet. Just wanted to give the board information that the proposed dwelling meets that and is also at 3,300 square feet. It is equatable to the average of these surrounding houses. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a single-family dwelling. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of the single-family dwelling extends into the seaward 50-foot RPA. Board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicant any special privileges denied by Chapter 23 to other property owners similarly situated in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 of the James City County Code and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed. The reasonable and appropriate conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be major for the proposed development. Should the board approve the application, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project, including a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permit. That an affidavit be recorded in the Williamsburg-James City County Courthouse. That a 6-foot high chain link fence be installed adjacent to the unimpacted wetlands. That a mitigation plan equating to 8 units be submitted. This condition has been sufficed. That a surety of $4,000 be submitted in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plantings. That this exception request approval will become null and void if construction is not begun by December 14th, 2023. And that written requests for an extension are submitted no later than November 2nd, 2023. Thank you very much, and I will be happy to answer any questions the board may have at this time.
Any questions for Mr. Long?
Showed the reduction. What was the previous square footage?
Pardon me, while I get to that slide. The original encroachments into the RPA were 3,593 square feet and 1,290 square feet into the wetlands. So in total, the reduction included 402 square feet into the RPA, or from the RPA, and 608 square feet from the wetlands. So you can see above, a lot of that wetland impact reduction came from moving the driveway out of the wetlands, and then shrinking the actual size of the house. The applicant's original proposal was for a single-story house, and much of that, the ability for that reduction to occur came from moving that house into a 2-story dwelling.
And you couldn't go any further left because of the boundary conditions?
Yes, I believe I'll let the applicant speak more to that. I know there was some concern with the construction going forward. I will point out that the building setback line is this dashed line here.
Mr. Long, in your conditions, and I may have missed this previously, but you had a condition for a chain link fence around the wetlands?
Yes, that was for the during construction only to ensure that no further impacts would occur.
Any other questions of Mr. Long? If not, oh,
Why was the chain link?
That is to ensure that, so during construction, that there is no over excavating or over clearing into those wetlands. It just keeps the contractors from moving outside of the approved limits of clearing.
Is something that they've started doing?
From time to time, I believe it has been utilized in this board, mostly in cases such as this one. Yes, sir.
any other questions of staff? If not, I will open the public hearing. Would the applicant or his agent care to speak to the board?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's been a few months.
Welcome.
Faces look a little different, but same board. Matt Roth, president of Roth Environmental, 700 Prescott Circle, Newport News, Virginia. I'm here on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Hochberg, speaking about 134 Swinley Forest. I'm going to kind of go through a little bit of what Trevor did before. Thank you for the presentation. Very good job. We've been working with staff for going on 2.5, 3 months on this project. I began as part of the environmental review, delineated the wetlands, and we're in the permit process right now to get the wetland permit, and that technically has exceeded the 45-day review period. Mr. Roadley will understand this probably more than anyone. So technically the permit is issued. We are actually waiting for a permit coverage letter just to have that in our file. That should be coming in the next couple of weeks. But I'm also going to take you through kind of how we got to where we are now with this project. It's gone through a couple different designs, and there's reasons for that, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about it. But this lot, it's an infill lot, as many of these are in Ford's Colony, subdivided in 1986, so it is a pre-Bay Act lot. The slope on the lot is very gradual from Swinley Forest back to the stormwater pond. There is roadway drainage that comes down Swinley Forest. It develops enough hydrologic head that it hits the ditch on larger storm events and will actually jump out of the ditch and onto our property in that front right quarter of the lot. There is a greenway or a drainage swale, drainage easement down the right side of this lot that drainage is supposed to go into, but as we see in some of these lots, the grading wasn't quite done exactly how it was supposed to have been done, and it's never been maintained. So you're getting a little bit of overwash basically from the road that goes on this lot that's probably making this wetland a little wetter than it is. It was probably a wetland to begin with, but it may be just a little bit wetter. Of note that these wetlands are the types of wetlands that prior to the changes to the Bay Act would not have had RPA buffers on them. They are considered connected and contiguous, and until this last change with the Chesapeake Bay Ordinance, these would not have been RPA wetlands. But they are now, and that's how we proceed forward. In our original design that we had on the schedule for last month that we deferred, the applicants were looking to build a single-story home. They've got some mobility issues, have a hard time with stairs, and so their real goal was to try to go with a single-story home so that they didn't have to deal with the stairs. We had many, many discussions over this, and once we submitted and had some more lengthy discussions with staff and reductions to the impervious area and the buffer, they were willing to compromise and develop the house into a two-story structure so that they could reduce the impacts into the buffer. Of course, this also had some benefits to the wetland areas because we were able to basically cut the wetland impacts in half. Our proposed revised design is for a two-story house. It reduces the total impervious footprint. We were able to turn the garage from kind of that courtyard design where it's more side loading toward the front to a front entry garage, which allowed us to bring the driveway a little bit to the west, which avoided the wetlands a little bit more. The house stayed in relatively the same position. Mr. O'Brien, this kind of addresses your point as to the location of the house. In positioning houses and trying to comply with Chesapeake Bay ordinance, wetland regulations, our goal is to try to balance that as much as we can. You can see that I don't have the work of the mouse. Oh, wait, yes I do. The wetland area is here, meaning this area on this side is wetlands. So the goal was to try to put as much of the house in the upland area as possible to just avoid those wetland impacts. We tried to push the house as far as we could to the west, and you've got this 10-foot building setback here. We needed to come over another 7 feet to be able to actually get this swale into the lot. And also, it brings the house forward to this point, which is on the building setback limit. We discussed with the engineer and with Ford's Colony the potential of moving the house to where it would come up on this front building setback line. But in Ford's Colony, they won't allow a house to be off-center and catty-corner, protecting the values of the neighbors' houses. And they don't want one house looking into the back of another one or vice versa. So we did do some investigation into that. The plan that we show here, the house being in the gray, is basically the least environmentally damaging alternative we could come up with as far as the combination of the Chesapeake Bay Act and the wetlands. As Mr. Long stated, we've reduced, I guess, the total impervious area and impact by 1,010 square feet. It's a 21% decrease in impacts to the environmental resources on the site from our original plan. As far as stormwater on the lot, we investigated installing a BMP or a rain garden on the site. There's two issues that we had basically with that does not make this practicable. The first is the infiltration on the lot. We have a soils report that shows that the soils are just so poorly drained we would not get any infiltration on it. So the next question was, you can create a BMP on a piece of concrete as long as you have an underdrain in it. The problem we have on this lot is we don't have enough fall from front to back to be able to outfall a pipe from an underdrain that would be under anything that could catch stormwater on this. So we did investigate it. It just won't work on this lot. The stormwater, though, will flow through the 3 established BMPs as shown on the plan that we had up there. Move forward. These are established BMPs that were designed and installed as part of the original subdivision. They were designed to take into account the runoff from this lot. So all 3, or four, there's a 4th one here, I guess. This little small one here. Any runoff that does come from this lot will go through the 4 BMPs, which, as Larry said earlier, it's kind of unusual to see one of these, and I kind of laughed because we've got the one right next to it. So the stormwater will come off this lot and filter through all of those, so there will be no sedimentation or anything that goes into Powhatan Creek where it actually outfalls. In looking at the designs on this house, we looked at it as a flipped around design. We looked at it as turning it again, as I discussed. The design we came up was the least environmentally damaging alternative. By turning the house or flipping it, you ended up with more wetland impacts, which is undesirable. Our mitigation for our proposed construction will be, one, we'll have wetland mitigation. Because this is in Ford's Colony, we will be mitigating for those wetland losses. We'll also be doing our Chesapeake Bay mitigation, which, as Trevor said, that'll be 8 units. Because of the environmental sensitivity of this lot and the wetlands that are on it, the applicant in the original design said, I'm more than willing to go ahead and purchase 4 units or half the mitigation into the James City County Mitigation Fund. As we moved along with our landscape plan, we were able to get 13.5 units on the total lot. Now, that 13 and a half units, Mr. Williams, Aaron Williams with Williams Landscape will discuss that here in a minute. But of that 13 units, 6 and a half will be within the clearing limits. So we're going to have the 4 units purchased, and then we're going to have 6 and a half units within the clearing limits. Most of those will be shrubs, and we've got an understory tree, but I've got it here. It equates to 1 understory tree and 71 shrubs within the clearing limits. There will also be 3,415 square feet of mulch. And we've also recommended that they enroll in the Turf Love program. Even though it's a small yard, there will be a small area of grass out there in the street, which will teach the applicants how to establish a healthy lawn without the need for heavy fertilizers and pesticides. I hope this helps you looking at and the willingness the applicant had in reducing the footprint of the house. We've worked hard with the staff here at the county, thank you very much, and with the applicants and their engineers to come up with the plan, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Matters before, any questions for Mr. Roth?
I think the requirement was 8 planting units.
It is 8.
So
It'll be 10 and a half total.
that include or not include the fund contribution?
That would include, I'm sorry. It would be, it's 4 units that'll be purchased, 6 and a half that are within the clearing limits. There will be enhancement in the areas that are already forested, and Mr. Williams will discuss that in a minute. That takes the actual planted number of units up to 13, or 13 and a half, I believe.
Is there any communication with the HOA about the existing swale and its maintenance out there in the greenway?
I saw that. There was a little bit of erosion in there. I work with Ryan Lee in Ford's Colony quite a bit. They are very active in working in their greenways. We haven't coordinated with them specifically on this, but on other projects, I remember the one on Walton Heath, they had a drainage problem in the back with some erosion, and they're very willing to go in there and actually correct that and put some EC3 in there and grass it in pretty well. So that to me, and I've recommended that to my clients, is when you get in, some of the discussions with Ford's Colony may be, we need to improve the greenway. The greenway between the 2 lots will not be touched. I mean, that's Ford's Colony's. But like I said, they are willing to go in there and do those sorts of things. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Roth? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I would like to open the public hearing on this case. Or excuse me, the public hearing is still open. Pardon, it's been a long day. Any other questions or comments from the audience on this particular matter?
Hello, my name's Aaron Williams, resident in James City County, 3456 Hunters Ridge in Williamsburg. We are the landscape design company that put together the mitigation planting plan, worked closely with the homeowners and with Matt Roth. Our goal was to exceed what was required and try to fit it around the clearing limits, but there were some requests that there were bare areas out in the natural area that needed additional plantings, and we stuck with everything that is on the James City County mitigation planting list as far as environmentally native plants and things of that nature. The turf area in the ditch is existing. That's been there for years and for good reason, because as it's stated, the street does slope heavily toward the lot. So, and that water, I believe, is captured and sent to the right and then down the easement beside the lot. So we just have a slight amount of turf that would continue from that up and kind of be adjacent to the right side of the driveway. So beyond that, I'm welcome any questions from you guys at this point.
I noted when we were on site that there's a fairly healthy scrub community between the limits of clearing and the BMP. Is that going to remain in place?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone else in the audience care to address the board?
Hi, we are Sari and Alan Hochberg.
Alan Hochberg.
Good
Hi,
evening
Sari.
to the board. Thank you for your time.
Give us your address, just,
4419 Pleasant View Drive.
thank you.
We just wanted to give you a little background. We bought this property in May in order to build our final retirement home. And we love the area, we love the lot, we love Ford's Colony. We love all the people we've met here, actually, so this means a lot to us. Before we purchased the lot, we were told by the realtor we could build any home that we wanted, as long as it followed the rules of Ford's Colony. However, we chose to build so that we could build a one-story home because of our health issues. Amongst them, I have a chronic back issue that I'm continually under doctor's care. My husband's had 2 knee surgeries and severe arthritis. So it made sense to us to try to build a one-story home, and that's what we had presented, and the staff was kind enough to give us a deferment and explain to us the importance of trying to lessen the footprint. So we love the neighborhood, we love the area, and we wanted that lot. So we were willing to forego some of the area in the first level and put it upstairs for our guests to come and our exercise room. It wasn't until the builder had requested a survey that we found out that this was an RPA property. We had never heard of an RPA before we moved to Virginia. We're here only a few months, so it's all new to us, and so we were kind of surprised. We didn't know what the limitations were. So that is why we still had tried to present the one story. And so when we were told, we figured we would work with you as best we could and accommodate your recommendations. So we have made it into a 2-story home, and we changed our driveway to a front load. We got special permission from Ford's Colony for that because they don't usually want that, but they said, with your circumstances, we understand it, we totally would approve that. We moved the location of the house, as Mr. Roth had indicated, all the way to the left as far as we could to, again, limit the mitigation issues. Please consider that we have tried very hard to make all of the modifications that you've requested. We've had our landscape architect work with us. They've been very kind and did this twice so that we used all of the indigenous plants that were on the approved list. We are willing to do all of the mitigation, the plantings that you have requested, and we promise to maintain the property as we have in all of our homes in our life. We want this to be beautiful and we want to take care of it. We understand the sensitivity of this environmental issue. We're asking for your approval tonight so we can move forward to build our home. Thank you so much for your time.
Any questions? Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. Would anyone else like to address the board on this matter?
Hi, I'm James Noren, 132 Swinley Forest, next door to what has been the vacant lot for a while. And obviously, the big concern is drainage. I appreciate the Hochbergs doing what they can, and it's amazing what they've had to go through to get this approved, which was kind of, why nobody built on it for 30 years. Kind of knew what we're up against, but I guess they didn't realize what they were up against. But the main thing is drainage, and I guess it's an HOA issue more than for this board. But it's just a ditch between where we talk about that drainage area to the right. I guess you guys saw it. You said you were there. Yeah, it's just a ditch. So this is going to make sense to us if the HOA will address that. And make it into a real culvert or whatever, whatever the word is, that will really do something. If that happens and we're able to do that, I think it'll be an addition to the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments for the board?
My name's Gail Norbury, and I live at 130 Swinley Forest. I'm next to James. My home is continually flooded all the time. The water from the whole of Swinley Forest runs down the street into what we used to call Swinley Forest Swamp. I'm very empathetic for someone trying to build on that place, and I probably think it's not your fault or the people that bought the land. It is the false realtor. Everybody in Swinley Forest knew that that was a swamp at the end of our street. We rely on it for our water, and what happens is Ford's Colony built a 25-foot passage between my house and the next one, which Dick, is to help with the water. It is so bad. So the water runs down the street next to my house and my neighbour, and then it runs down two other driveways straight into my front yard. And the only relief to this for the year when there's large rains is it goes down into the swamp. No one expected that property to be bought, and I'm so sorry that it happened to these, it seems to be really nice people, but it has a major impact. The board seems to be following the buyers of the land and not listening to the people who are really impacted by the water around. So we've had the last house that you spoke about and this house both affecting Swinley Forest, and they're on resources 80% and 100%, and you still go ahead and approve it. It would be nice if the board could really have a meeting with the people that are really impacted by this water runoff and come to some good solution. It's not just this house, it's basically the whole of Swinley Forest gets flooded down the street. And the only passage so far is the road, and it's going straight into, unfortunately, these people's home, a potential home. Thank you.
Just for clarity, is your home in this picture on the screen? Right there?
Yeah, straight down.
Just for reference.
Yeah, just there. And so the water comes down the street, goes into my drive. It's so bad I just had 6 pieces of my driveway replaced because the water just brings it up. It's just impossible. It kills all the plants. There's only a single road pathway going between the 2 houses. The water's going to flood there. The neighbour over there has a river that goes under the house into the swamp. It's just really bad, and I don't believe you've really gone and looked at what we're dealing with in that cul-de-sac. It's just wet and miserable all the time there.
If I can ask, have you, and perhaps you've done so with no effect, but have you brought these concerns to the Ford's Colony?
Yeah, they created the 25-foot drainage way between my house and my neighbour Dick. And then what happened is Ford's Colony sold a house next to Dick, so 3 houses away from this swamp area. And now we've got the runoff from that house. There's no mitigation of the water. There used to be a forest there keeping the forest, the water intact. And so now we've got that as well. So I'm sorry, I don't know what can be done about it, but it's really having an impact on the whole street. And that's why there's so many of us here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other, anybody, go right ahead.
Hello, I'm Gail Watkins. I live at 131 Swinley Forest. My concern is basically the drainage on the very front, across the front of the property. The entire street, and I mean the entire street, runs down, but it doesn't go into that little drainage area that you're talking about.
Well, yeah.
Completely misses it. It's more over where the proposed driveway is going in, so I'm not sure how that would be, but my concern is to address somehow the drainage across the very front of that property if this is going to continue. That would be my concern. I don't have a problem where my home is because I'm up on a little hill there. So, but everything coming down off my driveway and off of the house on the other side of me also comes down into that area.
Thank you.
We're both on hills. Okay.
Good evening, Chase Grog with Land Tech here. Since the last meeting, I guess I'll mention or try and answer some of the questions about drainage. We'll be happy to work with Ford's Colony to potentially increase. I've been to the lot myself. I know what there's not much of a berm or a V-ditch out front. So as part of our plot plan, the builder could increase that swale there and make it a more defined swale and direct it to Ford's Colony's drainage way and work with Ford's Colony to improve, just like Matt Roth mentioned with Walton Heath, improve their drainage way to ensure that it can take the capacity of the water flowing there and direct it away from the house.
I know this perhaps isn't before you because it may not pertain to this lot, but the comments that were made today were larger than just what's happening on this lot, it sounded like to me.
Right, yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's a street issue, which is a private right-of-way of Ford's Colony. So it sounds like it's a bigger water quantity issue with the ditches and culverts and what they've decided to. So really all we can talk about is, obviously we want to direct the water away from our house. We're not in the interest of taking Swinley Forest runoff and directing it right into our front yard, which the plot plan, it's all sloping left to right. So any water that would even come over an enhanced burn, if we correct the work with Ford's Colony, correct that swale, it should direct pretty much all of it. During some major hurricane, even at that point, the front yard is all sloping left to right, back into their drainage ditch, and it would not make it to the house. So again, our main goal would be to avoid, the water. But yes, I agree that it sounds like it's a bigger issue, as well as if they've cut a ditch, 2 houses up, obviously potentially all of Swinley Forest is not even no longer coming to the end like it may have used to in the past.
Show me the ditch. Is it between the proposed project location and the house to the right?
Yes, there's a greenway.
I can see it. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, so
Okay.
and since we actually did our topographic survey, they actually did some work in the front there to kind of fan it out more, but basically in that it just, it comes under the driveway to the left and just, there's not very much a swale there. So, but the greenway is where it's supposed to go, and since it's their maintenance easement, they can cut a ditch all the way to the pond.
Apparently not 100% effective because it seems like the drift of the water is left to right and doesn't even get sent down that greenway. Is that what I'm hearing? But that's not necessarily a lot issue. That's a community issue.
It's a community issue. It's not a buffer issue. It's not a, it's none of, basically the ditch in front of this property is non-existent. So you have water coming down both sides of Swinley Forest. It comes around the cul-de-sac, and Ford's Colony's ditch is not very deep. And so during a good storm, it comes right onto the lot. And then, but as you can see, the lot is sloped left to right. So it's all headed to the back right corner. Just at the moment, not, if anything, a potential approval of this project would help relieve some of, but the concerns are all our house would flood is really, it sounds like there's a concern.
For you.
Yes, sir.
The EMP pond that's directly behind these homes here, top elevation, water.
I don't know that off the top of my head, Mr. Wood, but the contours back there are 31, 32, so it's 3 feet.
In relationship to the road cul-de-sac, what is the relationship to the top of the BMP pond ability to drain to that?
I just
Show the contour. You can probably.
I'm trying to read what that benchmark says. It would appear to me that that benchmark, I believe, says 38. So it's about, there's 3 feet of fall from the cul-de-sac, or no, actually there's more than that. So I mean, our contours back there are 33, 32. It's basically a bank. So there's probably about 6 feet of fall.
Sounds like to me it's a grading problem.
It's a grading problem.
Ford's Colony, the reason why the neighbors are having the problem.
Yeah, I mean, and not to keep bringing up Walton Heath, but Walton Heath is one that at least a couple of you are aware of, where there was a greenway that the developer never put a ditch in, and that's most likely what happened.
Maybe that ought to be addressed.
Mhm.
I would think the homeowners would be, on need to investments.
Yeah, of course, yeah, I mean, it's a property value issue for them, right? It's a flooding water coming to them issue, so.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to address the board on this matter? If not, I will close the public hearing. Matter is before the board. I would ask Mr. Wilson or Mr. Long, given the scale of the issue with drainage in Swinley Forest, is there an opportunity outside of this permit application to have a discussion with the HOA on how that might be addressed?
Yes, we can initiate an email to Mr. Ryan Lee, who works for Ford's Colony HOA, specifically to look at improvements to this greenway between I believe it's 132 and 134 Swinley Forest.
Beyond that, it sounded like some of the issues went beyond this particular lot. I mean, in fairness, we don't usually get a big turnout at these meetings. So I'm not thankful that you're here, but I appreciate your concerns. And so I'd like for you to think you've been heard. So if you can initiate that, and please let us know how that evolves, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, it sounds like from the discussion from several of the speakers tonight that the ditch system surrounding Swinley Forest has not been maintained or maintained well over the years and has been impacted from previous house construction.
Thank you. As I said, the matter is before the board. Any additional discussion?
Just for clarification for me, just for consistency of approach, Mr. Chair, I know they reduced the square footage of this home down to 3,300, which is in line with the surrounding homes, but they went to a two-story, so it's roughly probably a 2,000 square foot-ish footprint. In comparison to the 106 Rye, that 2,200 square foot home, was that a single story or a two-story structure? Does anybody recall on the board?
No.
I'm just kind of curious as to the actual footprint, whether it's comparable to what we approved earlier, would just be my question.
Mr. May, if I may address your question, 106 Rye was a two-story house as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Lot was a bit unique with it being a flag lot, though, so it was a bit harder to build on. And to me, this lot, it'd be one thing if we were taking the drainage on the lot and sending it elsewhere onto other lots, but truly, for me, the question is, when I came out to look at this property, it was just kind of a matter of channel adequacy, truly. So, I put trust in Ford's Colony HOA that, perhaps the swale, or if you want to call it that, how it stands currently, can be regraded or maintained. If there truly is, 3 or more feet of fall to the pond, you could run a ditch, at least 2% and get some solid drainage. So maybe this is an opportunity to sort of help channelize and send it to the BMP rather than just sort of sheet flow and pond.
Any other comments? Matter is before the board. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA 22-0135-134 Swinley Forest.
The motion is to adopt. Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Mr. Knight?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you all for your patience. We have another item on the agenda, CBPA 22-0139 at 2800 Durfee's Mill Road.
Mr. Rodlick, can we pause for 1 minute to let?
Yes, we can.
Please.
Not as popular.
Give everybody an
anymore,
opportunity.
It'll also help me figure out which presentation it is.
All right, Mr. Long, or excuse me, Ms. Benedict.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Robin Benedict, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 22-0139. Mr. Ryan Stevenson with AES Consulting Engineers has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of the Boyd Corporation for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a single-family dwelling located at 2800 Durfee's Mill Road. This is within the Durfee's Mill subdivision and the Mill Creek watershed. You can see the parcel outlined in blue here above. The parcel was platted in 1998 after the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. Here's aerial photography of the entire site, and zoom in a little bit closer to the actual location of the proposed home. Here's the topography at the site. Starting at the road, it's a fairly semi-steep drop down until you hit the wetlands and the back portion of the lot. There is JCSA easements shown in yellow here. And the resource protection area. The total lot size of this property is 0.92 acres, of which 96% is located within the RPA. I think that number needed to be updated, more like 100% of the property is within the RPA. My apologies. The applicant is proposing to construct a single-family dwelling. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 1,052 square feet of impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA and 2,301 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA, totaling 3,353 square feet of impacts. On the site plan above, you can see the 100-foot resource protection area, again out in the middle of the street, and the 50-foot resource protection area up here. In yellow is the area of the driveway and the house that is within the landward 50-foot RPA. And in orange is the area of the home within the seaward 50-foot RPA. Additionally, in the back here in green, we have the edge of wetlands. This gray area here between the house and the wetlands is the limits of clearing, so that does back up all the way to the wetland line. And this black line here up front that is the front building setback line. So you can see there's about 5 to 10 feet of space between the beginning of the home itself and the front setback line. Required mitigation for this amount of impacts. Impervious impacts equals 8 planting units, which is 8 canopy trees, 16 understory trees, and 24 shrubs. No infiltration measures have been proposed at this time because of the proximity to the wetlands and the subsequent soils. And the wetlands on this property are non-tidal and therefore outside the jurisdiction of the local wetlands board, and no wetland impacts are proposed at this time. Here's site photography standing at the street looking towards the property. Here you can see the proposed limits of clearing and the adjacent property. Again, the clearing limit, along with a wetlands flagging on the right side of the property. Looking back, again, towards the wetlands, further back in the property, here is a mark for the JCSA easement. The white was the limits of clearing towards the back of the property against the wetlands line and wrapping around the corner. And then looking back up the lot at the street. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a single-family dwelling. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a single-family dwelling extends into the seaward 50-foot RPA. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicant any special privileges denied to other property owners in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and reasonable conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be major for the proposed development. Staff recommends denial for this exception request. It has not been shown to be the minimum necessary to afford relief. However, if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. A mitigation plan equating to 8 planting units must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division and approved prior to the project start. A surety of $4,000 must be submitted in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plantings. Then an affidavit must be recorded in the Williamsburg-James City County Courthouse prior to the issuance of a building permit. A 6-foot chain link fence must be installed at the limits of clearing to reduce impacts to the adjacent wetlands. This exception request approval shall become null and void if construction has not begun by December 14th, 2023, and written request for an extension must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than November 2nd, 2023, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Questions for staff? Hearing none, we will move to open the public hearing.
Hello, my name is Ryan Stevenson with AES Consulting Engineers, 5248 Old Town Road. I'm here to answer any questions you guys may have, and I also just wanted to kind of reiterate a few things. You know, we were able to do this with no wetland impacts. The client is working to obtain an exception from the ARB to go from a side load to a front load garage, similar to what we heard previously. You know, it's a comparable building footprint to the surrounding area, and the building was pulled. It looks like there's a little bit of room to pull it forward, but there's actually a front porch there that is within a tenth of the front setback line, which kind of keeps us from pulling the building any further forward. So,
Any questions for Mr. Stevenson? So given the slope of the lot, are you filling to create the grade? Yeah. Go back to one of my previous comments about not so much the construction, but as the lot is over the years, most of the trees that are currently on the lot are graded away when you clear it for construction. maintain the wetland limits, but now you have a slope going down into the wetlands. And are there any measures that are proposed to help reduce sheet flow that, in some instances, I know sheet flow is good, but in my experience in these settings, it just leads to further erosion, and there is no BMP downstream.
There's not, no, I mean, the grading that we utilize in the backyard is not as steep as some of the ones you've seen and as it could be. It's not a 3-to-1 slope, which we hope will help kind of allow it to be a least velocity impact to the wetland. You know, we could pull the impacts back, but then you have a steeper slope, which could, you know, we see creates more erosion. You know, downspouts could be directed to the swale on the one side and daylighted on the other side. But otherwise, just good vegetation of a semi as flat as possible backyard is kind of what we were looking for.
Is there any opportunity for reestablishing a vegetated buffer as opposed to fescue in areas that maybe at the TOA slope?
Absolutely.
Also the potential to bury your downspouts to convey?
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for Mr. Stevenson?
Barrels coming to back on it to fire, or would like to have rain barrels to catch the water and stuff and flow it out. Don't see that on any of the applications that come.
We certainly don't see it as frequently. Yeah.
Does that have an impact to cushion the flow?
It could. It can. I mean, it allows it to kind of build up and then slowly release. You know, it's either something like that, or like Mr. Rodley said, you could, you know, bury the pipe and daylight it elsewhere.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments with respect to this application? Questions? Come forward. Please state your name and address for the record.
Gene Barr, and I'm at 2804 Durfee's Mill Road, right, I guess, on the left side of the lot, if you're facing it. And just a couple of comments. It is the water behind us. I guess it's Mill Creek that runs down through. It was Lake Powell, which now has become mud flats, but it is tidal, because if you go by there, low tide is nothing but mud, and then you get about a foot of water, maybe 18 inches at high tide. The other question or comment I had, what's the footprint of the house? What size is the first floor, square footage?
Yep.
First floor? Okay. Also, one thing I've noticed over the years, when it rains, there is water that comes out of the side of the hill, and I'm not sure. I'd have to wait and watch.
On this lot?
On this lot over here, yes, it comes out. So it's going to be a mess if it's under the footprint of the house and stuff. And I'm not sure exactly where it comes out. I'm going to say probably about the edge of the house, but I don't know for sure.
That's useful, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Everybody, my name is Evan Goff. I'm at 2805 Durfee's Mill Road, right across the street. Had similar concerns to Gene. Also, if we could go back to some of the pictures, you can probably see by the elevation changes, but right where that fence is at the beginning of our neighborhood is a very, very busy area of Jamestown Road. If the picture went over another 10 feet, you would see there's massive power lines on that lot. And beyond the white fencing, it drops off very steeply. I don't know what the grade was. So I was concerned about that. I also live across the street, so I'm concerned about some of the native species. So I actually did write down a couple of them and pull them up. In that lot, there are eastern redbuds, flowering dogwood, our state flower and tree. It's got pawpaw trees in some of those pictures you can see, which is another native species to Virginia. We've got barred owls and a bald eagle's nest within that property. Didn't hear anything about talking about some of the native species. I can give you a video. I've got a video of a eagle couple mating in my driveway that came across those trees and landed in my driveway a couple years ago. So just wanted to be aware of that environmental impact because it is a fairly big, deep lot that goes all along Jamestown Road. My final thought would be, it's a pretty big natural buffer to our neighborhood entrance. And as you break those kind of entrance just to the right of where the fencing is, there's a big neighborhood entrance sign. So I'd be interested to see how close that is in the rendering there on the right. I also wrote down that because this proposed lot is right on Jamestown Road, there would be a bunch of additional heavy traffic going in and out of the neighborhood as they clear the native vegetation pretty heavily, as well as just increasing some of the danger to the busy Jamestown Road. So I just want to make that aware. If you can see that where the, does this work? There we go. So all of this right here is the big sign to the neighborhood, Lake Powell Point. That white fence goes along here. Gene, who was just up here, his house is here. So that house would basically be on his, I think that's his master bedroom door where a driveway would be. My house is here located to the right at 2805. So I really just concerned really traffic flow, the breakdown of all these native species that several of those listed were actually endangered to Virginia. So concerned about that big time, as well as just losing some of the entrance flow to the neighborhood. So the steepness in that lot is severe, and like Gene said, there is a lot of tidal flow. I've been back there. It's wet. It's boggy. There's turtles. They come up in my driveway. So it's not quite as the pictures proposed there in the discussion. So that was it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. And just for the record, we did go out and visit this site as well and walk the property down to the wetland. And I will concur that the wetlands are fairly lush and they do back up to or adjacent to a tidal system. I'm not sure the tidal limits come all the way to the toe of this lot, but regardless, it is connected and contiguous to tidal. Any other questions or comments on this project, excuse me. Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. The matter is before the board for discussion.
Now, the 8 planting units are all native. So you're replacing what's cleared with native for native.
This is a tough one. I mean, we've just reviewed several applications that are, I could characterize as similar in nature in that they were platted before the Chesapeake Bay Act. They proposed encroachment. There were efforts to minimize that encroachment, which we encourage. One distinguishing factor here is there is no downstream BMP to receive that runoff. At one point, Lake Powell, as we all know, was dammed and created a lake, which was a quasi-BMP, even if it wasn't a regulated BMP, but that is now gone. So still a water of the state. Just some comments. Oh, I'm sorry. I'd like to open the public hearing for receive your comments.
Evan Goff, 2805. I liked your point about the native species. You're probably familiar. If you cut down a native plant, let's say it's an oak tree, it's 150 feet tall, it can supply housing to more than 200 native species, being birds, owls, eagles, all that stuff. When you replant that with let's say a 4-foot native, You don't get any of that for years. So just something to consider. Because if you look at that lot, when you guys walk through it, it has hundreds of native trees on it. It's a deep, deep lot that is also a natural barrier for light pollution and some of the other species that live in there. So just a consideration. So thanks.
Thank you.
Sorry for speaking up.
Close the public hearing.
Yep.
Any other comments from the board? Questions for staff? Discussion?
Saying that as far as the Lake Powell Pond that washed out does not serve any
It's free flowing now, so it,
flowing, so it really doesn't serve anything as far as
So the sediment washout on this one would be, what happens to it?
goes into the pond and either settles in the pond or is carried downstream. You know, the dam itself eroded away. There was a breach.
Yep.
And over time, that eroded. But I'm not sure the current status of that, whether that was left or repaired. And when I say repaired, I mean stabilized as a breach. But it's my understanding that there's free-flowing tide up now past the dam, the old dam.
on the upper end of the Road 31 have a BM.
Non-regulated BMP.
They need to go downstream. Looks like to me, with a large body of pond there, that couldn't serve as somewhat, you say it's free flowing, but as somewhat as some of the characteristics.
Okay.
I wasn't able to visit the site. You said you were. Did anybody else visit it? No. Any other observations from?
I mean, they're not encroaching into the wetlands. They are clearing down to the limits of wetlands, hence my comment about perhaps restoring a vegetated natural buffer between the edge of wetlands and the maintained portion of the property. Possible suggestion, but we're still clearing down right to the edge of our jurisdiction, or the wetlands, excuse me.
And the slope was 2-to-1, or you said it wasn't 3-to-1? It was
Flatter than that.
better than that.
Trying to reduce velocity a little bit, so it's a trade-off. I get it.
Anything else that can be done?
I'll leave that up to the applicant to consider, but right now the matter is before us to either adopt or the resolution or deny the application. I have a motion.
I'll make a motion. Make a motion to adopt resolution, grant exception for Chesapeake Bay Board case.
So we have a motion to adopt. Mr. Waltrip? Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Mr. Knight?
I abstain my vote due to conflict of interest.
Mr. Roadley?
No.
Motion passes.
The last case on the agenda is CBPA 220120 at 108 Mercar, construction of a single-family dwelling. Ms. Benedict?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Robin Benedict, Watershed Planner. Mr. Chase Grogg with Land Tech Resources has requested a deferral of this application for exception to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance while the site plan is finalized for the project. Staff concurs with this request. As this case has been public notice, staff recommends that the public hearing be open and stay open until the January meeting, at which time the case will be heard.
Very much. The public hearing is now open and will remain open until we hear it again.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
If I may, we do need to vote on the deferral request, please.
Okay. There is a motion or a request to defer. Can I get a vote from the board? Aye?
Aye.
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 Aye. Under board considerations, CBPA 210130 at 115 Heathery. Mr. Long?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, Watershed Planner. Mr. Martino Wynn has requested a one-year extension to CBPA-22-0130, which was originally granted on January 12th of 2021. Staff concurs with this request with the stipulation that all permit conditions except for the expiration date be authorized and the new date of expiration be January 12th, 2023. This would require a approval from this board and a vote as well.
Request for an extension. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Favorite election of officers. Haley's currently serving in both roles. I don't think that's perhaps fair. I'm currently vice chair. I'm willing to throw my name in the hat for chair if the board members are in agreement.
Nod ahead, yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. There is a vice chair slot open now, accepting nominations for vice chair. Doesn't happen very often.
I'm vice chair of the Wetlands Board. I would go ahead and throw my name in the hat for.
Mr. May, thank you very much, has stepped up to vice chair of the Chesapeake Bay Board. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So be it.
Thank you.
And Mr. Long, would you continue on in the role of secretary? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So be it. Thank you. No matters of special privilege, and do I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chair, excuse me one moment. I actually do have one matter of special privilege. We have before us our new alternate, Ms. Leslie Bowie. She is in the crowd this evening, so she will be filling another alternate spot here on the board shortly. So just wanted to introduce you all.
Well, you
Thank you
picked
very
a long night to come out, so but thank you. Appreciate you sitting.
One or two now?
We have two alternates, Jason being one, or Mr.
Oh,
Knight being one,
okay.
and Ms. Bowie being the second.
Thought he was permanent.
Thank you very much.
We have a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Thank you. We are adjourned.